Chapter 166 The Long Easter, Part 3. Now it seems they're angry. Cobblestone sneered, looking out at the heavy rain. Schiller said to him, I think you already know that Gordon has brought in many patients with similar symptoms to yours. Your symptoms are probably all related to getting caught in the rain. Schiller shook his head and said, In mental illness, it is rare to have two cases with completely identical characteristics, but now there are more than two. We are discussing how to deal with this. The drainage situation in Gotham is not optimistic. If this continues, flooding will occur tonight. Batman's voice accompanied the sound of rain. Suddenly, the room was illuminated by a flash of light that turned everything a ghastly white. Then, a deafening clap of thunder came from afar, and all three looked out the window. Schiller looked at Batman and said, I have a bunch of patients to deal with. I don't want to get involved in this. Batman stared at him, seemingly unfazed by his excuses, as if certain Schiller would continue. Sure enough, Schiller went on. But they made me spend a fortune on a cheap, doomed umbrella, and then, when I had no umbrella, it started pouring rain. The rain outside the window was getting heavier and heavier, and the booming thunder drowned out the conversation inside. Closer to the thunder on the horizon, Gotham University seemed to be shrouded in a dark fog, with only one office light on, and it was very noisy inside. Are you sure this distance is enough to divert all the rainwater in this area to the designated height? Look here. We must pay attention to the water pressure here. If we don't add supporting structures, it could very well lead to the complete collapse of the underground sewer system. A directional blast is needed here, yes, I'm sure. The professors gathered around the desk, discussing how to solve the problem of excessive flooding in Gotham City. Most people can't last more than 3 minutes in this kind of discussion, because they keep spouting a lot of engineering and mechanics jargon which makes people dizzy. But in reality, this was no small-scale theoretical exercise. One after another, terms related to explosives engineering came out of their mouths, clearly indicating that this was another discussion full of Gotham style. At the Gotham Police Department, Gordon, who had just dealt with some somewhat disoriented criminals, took a cup of hot coffee from a young officer. He raised his arm, drank the coffee in one gulp, walked behind his desk and sat down. Just as he was about to rest for a while, he noticed a shadow behind him. Gordon looked back and sighed, saying, Batman, you don't have to make your entrance ceremony so gruesome every time. I need your help, Detective Gordon. Gordon didn't answer. He was listening to Batman speak. Batman continued, seemingly oblivious to his surroundings. Next, I'll be lighting up bat lights at several locations in Gotham City. Then, a gang's construction crew will arrive and begin digging. You'll need to send people there to protect them. Gordon opened his mouth, unable to answer for a moment. He said, You mean, get the police to send people to protect the gang? He turned to Batman, extended his hand, and said, Okay, if you need our cooperation to deal with that mysterious organization, then I can understand. But are you sure those gangsters need our protection? Batman's tone was serious as he said, This is to prepare for possible surprise attacks. The police need heavy firepower. Can you tell me the plan? I have to be responsible for the safety of my subordinates. Batman shook his head and said, Remember that nursery rhyme, the Court of Owls, always watching your every move. Gordon felt a chill run down his spine. He instinctively glanced around his office, but he couldn't refute Batman's claims. When it came to mysterious forces, Gordon couldn't be certain that he wasn't being watched. I can assure you that this plan is effective. Gordon looked at him, and finally, Batman said, Because I am Batman. The dark clouds grew thicker and thicker, and the raindrops fell to the ground with tremendous force. The rain was heavy and torrential, but amidst this continuous downpour, a slight humming sound came from the city, and then several blinding lights shone from Gotham City. Schiller stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window of his ward at Arkham Asylum and saw several bat patterns projected into the dark night sky. Amidst the deafening thunder of spring, the still bat lights seemed to come alive in the refraction of the rain, transforming into something like a petrel soaring through the storm, displaying an astonishing momentum as it breaks through the darkness. Before this, the cacophony of rain almost drowned out all other sounds, and the dark clouds swallowed up all the lights. The enormous city seemed to have been placed in an aquarium, sinking into the icy water, continuing to sink into the abyss. The instant the bat signal came on, Gotham, which had been submerged by the rain, suddenly came to life, like a drowning person who suddenly transformed into a giant whale that was not afraid of ocean currents and waves. Boiling voices shattered the darkness, and the lights, like flames, ignited things that could not burn in the water. Bubbles rose up, broke through the frozen surface, and created countless ripples. In the turbulent rainy night, the explosions were louder than the thunder. Several construction teams drove various kinds of construction machinery, roaring forward. The headlights of the truck convoy cut through the rain like blades, and the horns sounded like sharp kettle whistles, proclaiming the boiling of this night. Shouting, yelling, and chaotic cries filled the air as gangsters rallied their friends, creating chaos beyond measure and madness beyond madness. They blasted rocks, smashed the ground, and dug downwards where beams of light rose, until they carved several artificial abysses into the city's surface. They are fearless and indifferent to the rain like arrows and the wind like knives. Madness is the poison of the Gotham people, but also their armor. As more structures were built, rainwater falling from the sky into Gotham began to be artificially guided to flow underground. Cobblestone stood atop the living hell, watching the flames rise in the rainy night. He didn't use an umbrella, nor did he care. His deeply sunken eyes were filled with madness. He let out a cold laugh and muttered to himself, "You rats will never understand. Gotham is Gotham, and it will always be Gotham." The water on the surface of Gotham began to be diverted underground, and in a dark conference room somewhere underground, a person wearing a white bird-shaped mask let out a disdainful sneer. "They're probably just trying to save themselves. After all, even idiots have some brains," a masked woman said sarcastically. "Isn't it a bit too risky for us to start the water supply project so early? We've been preparing for this for many years, and we even renovated the sewers from the very beginning of the city's construction," another slightly younger voice asked. "They've already discovered us, and they're still using such despicable methods against us. We must make these people pay. How dare they?" Everyone uttered angry shouts, then fell silent as if recalling the scene from that day, forced to suppress the urge to vomit. "We cannot give up Gotham," an aged voice said. "Retreat and relocation are only temporary. We have been here for too long, and we will never give it all up. This is our most secretive stronghold," the woman said. "As long as they can't find us, even if the monsters go berserk on the ground, it's none of our business." After saying that, she turned to a man next to her and said, "Go check our sealing devices again. Make sure no rainwater leaks in. They may want to drain rainwater into the ocean through the groundwater system, but that's simply impossible. The sewer system doesn't drain water that quickly enough, and Gotham will eventually be flooded. And after this rain, chaos will once again seep into every corner of Gotham, just like it did 10 years ago. The owls will always watch over this place. Fear it, scream it, for it will become our food." A series of snickers, like birdsong, drifted from the dimly lit conference room, like the calls of night owls in the forest. The rain continued relentlessly, and more water was being channeled underground at a slower and slower pace. Gordon stood beside the fence at one of the construction sites and shouted, "The drainage system has reached its limit. The entire underground of Gotham must be filled with rainwater now." Brock sat on his motorcycle, waving a flashlight in their direction. The blinding light made Gordon cover his eyes with his arm. He heard Brock shout, "They said everything's set up. Get ready to evacuate." Gordon turned around, raised his arms, and shouted, "Everyone, prepare to evacuate. Get everyone to the upper floors." Then, he picked up the phone and said to the other end, "District 5. District 5 manager, did you hear that? How's it going on your end? Has everyone left the first and second floors? Didn't you tell them this was the Godfather's order? How many times have I told them to evacuate on command? Do you expect Falcone to call them personally to discuss this?" Brock, holding an umbrella, said loudly, "We can only hope that their method actually works. Otherwise Gotham will really be flooded." Gordon hung up the phone and said, "We have to believe in Batman, and we can only believe in him." Soon, the lights on the upper floors of the Gotham buildings began to come on gradually, while the lights on the lower floors went out one by one, and everyone moved to higher places. The Owl Court members, who received the information from the surveillance equipment, dismissed it as nothing more than a delaying tactic. They believed that the flood would eventually wash everything away, and hiding high up would be useless. But soon, their smiles faded. Sitting in the dimly lit conference room, the members of the Court of Owls suddenly felt a violent gust of cold wind sweep across the entire stronghold. This icy storm exploded directly from the point of origin, instantly engulfing every corner of Gotham's underground. The torrential rain was frozen into ice, and when the raindrops fell from the sky, the splashing water was frozen into crystal-clear ice crystals. Looking down on Gotham, a giant snowflake burst forth from a small generator, and almost instantly, all the liquid on the ground and surface of Gotham froze, as if time had stood still. Then, several generators were launched into the sky and exploded in the clouds. The water in the clouds was frozen into ice, which broke apart as it fell and turned into ice blocks when it hit the ground. The dark clouds that clung to Gotham were enveloped by a low-temperature zone formed by layers of cold air currents, and the rain that fell turned directly into fluttering snowflakes. Within minutes, the entire sky and underground of Gotham City were frozen solid, as if the city had been put on pause. Not only were the aquariums frozen, but the hands that reached in to scoop up fish also perished. The ice generated by the freezing generator was just as hard as rock. Hundreds of meters of ice formed around the Owl outpost, freezing everyone inside a solid block of ice. Did Victor Frith make this? Batman asked Schiller in a ward at Arkham Asylum. You need to show some respect to your professor and not call him by his full name. And even if you ask, I can guess that you already have hundreds of plans to deal with him. The one who can freeze Gotham, Batman muttered to himself. Actually, freezing can't solve the real problem of rain clouds. Schiller shook his head and said, the fact that the freezing device is so effective means that the rain clouds that accumulate rainwater have indeed been tampered with. All right, stop thinking about your anti-frozen Gotham plans. I think you should be able to see some things more clearly now. What? Batman saw Schiller walk to the window, stop by the French windows, gaze at the cold night outside, the icy light reflecting off his face, and say casually, when I don't have an umbrella, nobody can expect to get rained on. Chapter 167, The Long Easter, Part 4. At the Gotham Police Department, Gordon flicked his trench coat, pushed open the door, and strode into his office, where he found Schiller and Batman already waiting for him. Gordon said with a headache, judging from my colleagues' reports, the situation is not optimistic. He walked to his desk and sat down, saying, to be honest, your approach was very effective, but the problem is that the damage was too great. Gotham's entire underground water system was destroyed, and a lot of the building foundations were also damaged. Of course, we expected this. Schiller nodded. At that moment, Victor walked in with a document, and Gordon stood up and poured everyone a cup of hot coffee. The others went to the table and sat down, drinking hot coffee and chatting, while Batman stood alone in the corner of the room. The damage is indeed significant, but it did not exceed our expectations. Victor pointed to a few lines in the report and said, we anticipated that the freezing process from water to ice would cause volume expansion, so the extent of the damage to the sewage system was within our estimated range. Approximately how much? Gordon asked, taking a sip of his coffee. It's all of them. Gordon spat out a mouthful of water and said, I know the damage is huge, but you're telling me now that Gotham's entire underground water system is destroyed? Batman's voice came from the side. Actually, it's more serious than that. It's not just the underground buildings. Many buildings on the surface of Gotham have foundations that can't withstand low temperatures, and many buildings have cracked. They all need to be rebuilt. This loss is too great. Didn't you consider this before you made this plan? Gordon asked, puzzled. Our logistics system was finally taking shape, and now we have to start from scratch again. We anticipated this, but as the saying goes, you can't build something new without destroying it. Schiller sighed and said, Detective Gordon, you should know that although Gotham has made some progress thanks to the development of the logistics system, it is still far from enough. We may have some advantages here, but not absolute advantages. We don't have any flagship industries, nor do we have anything that can't be replaced by other cities. What we need to do now is to artificially give Gotham an advantage that no other city in the world can imitate. I understand what you mean, but I don't understand what this has to do with the losses caused by freezing Gotham. Schiller gave Victor a look, signaling him to explain. Victor said to Gordon, I think you should also know that a cryogenic generator capable of freezing the entire Gotham City in an instant cannot be an ordinary ice maker. The reason why the low-temperature generator can achieve this effect is because its ice is different. Ice? What's different about ice? Have you heard of super ice? Gordon shook his head. Victor said, You don't need to know how it works. Anyway, I'm using a newly developed super ice in the cryogenic generator. After contact with water, it crystallizes at a rate exceeding 1,000 kilometers per hour and can still exist at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. If further improved, I think I might be able to freeze all of Earth's oceans in a single day. Hearing this, Gordon gasped. He looked Victor over again. This scholarly professor always seemed gentle and refined, but his words carried the air of a final villain. This is not the kind of small ice cubes we usually add to drinks. Its hardness and stability are no less than that of metal. You can think of it as a kind of artificial diamond structure, only it is slightly less hard and has the low-temperature properties of ice. So, Schiller concluded, the reconstruction problem you are worried about does exist, but it is not an ordinary reconstruction problem, and it will bring an unexpected benefit. This ice is indeed very difficult to process, but once we utilize it, the entire underground of Gotham will become a huge natural cold storage facility. Schiller then revealed to Gordon the entire Gotham reconstruction plan. The reconstruction of Gotham City did not involve melting all the ice blocks. In fact, that was very difficult. The ice blocks created by Victor Frozen were not ordinary edible ice. This dense ice was extremely hard and required extremely high temperatures to melt. It was more like a solid material than ice blocks used for cooling. This ice has replaced the rock layers beneath Gotham, meaning the entire city now sits on a single massive block of dense ice. Therefore, there was no need to melt the ice during reconstruction. Instead, passageways were directly carved out of the ice, transforming the entire Gotham underground into a giant natural cold storage facility. This type of ice is difficult to process, and the construction progress will be slow, but fortunately it can be used as needed and the construction can be carried out in stages. For example, to build a cold storage facility, you choose a good location, build the buildings on the ground, and then start digging. Once you dig out a room, you can put the products in to freeze them first, and then slowly dig out other rooms. Although the process is slow and requires a lot of manpower and resources, once completed, it will provide a natural cold storage facility with almost no maintenance costs and ample space to fully meet the storage needs of bulk commodities. More importantly, Victor's freezing technique has unparalleled preservation capabilities. In the comics, he has frozen Batman into an ice cube on several occasions and then chatted with him. Batman emerged from the ice completely unharmed and was even able to beat up Mr. Freeze. Besides Batman's protagonist aura, Victor's superb freezing technology's ability to preserve freshness was also a crucial factor. The Gotham villain's genius technology is just that absurd, but if used for good, it's an unparalleled and powerful productive force. When the cost of cold chain storage in a city is reduced to a minimum, it will be impossible for it not to become a logistics hub. Producers looking to reduce logistics costs will flock there. Gordon looked thoughtful, then said, "You mean instead of fixing the sewers, we'll just use this ice as a natural cold storage? The sewers will still be there, but we can rebuild a sewer system. And these dense ice layers that can exist at room temperature will become Gotham's trump card for development. This massive underground cold storage facility will be able to store cold chain products from the entire East Coast, making Gotham an indispensable location for cold chain transportation across the country." Gordon looked at Batman, who was silent for a moment before saying, "According to my calculations, it is indeed possible. Although there are still many technical problems and the reconstruction will take a lot of time. Once successful, Gotham will become a world-class logistics hub. Other cities would find it difficult to replicate this success. Even if they had Victor's cryogenic technology, they would still find it difficult to have such a cooperative owl court. Their artificial rainmaking technology is indeed impressive. It lasts a long time, produces a large amount of rain, and can gather enough water to create a stable ice layer in a very short time, which is quite remarkable," Schiller commented. Gordon almost felt sorry for the Court of Owls. They were being sold out and were even helping the seller count the money. "I was initially quite interested in the Owl Court's artificial rainmaking technology," Schiller continued. "After all, as you've seen, their technology works quite well. But after thinking about it, even if we could get the technology, we would have to spend a lot of money to implement it, and the federal government would not agree to flooding Gotham just to build an underground natural cold storage facility. So it's best to let the Court of Owls do the work for us. They've done a great job so far, creating a flood that has built the world's largest underground cold storage facility, making an outstanding contribution to the future development of Gotham City. I think they deserve an award for outstanding contribution or something. However, there's a problem," Gordon said hesitantly. "I don't mean to discourage you, but as you just said, dealing with this kind of ice is extremely difficult and a huge undertaking, likely very expensive. And rebuilding the drainage system will also cost money." Schiller placed his hands on the table and suddenly changed the subject. saying to Gordon, "Detective Gordon, have you ever handled a kidnapping case?" "Kidnapping? I did encounter a few when I was in Chicago, but since I came to Gotham, there have only been murders, not kidnappings. Even in a kidnapping case, if the hostage is already dead before the police arrive at the scene, then it can't be considered a kidnapping. It's okay, you just need to understand the principle behind it." "Principle? What are you trying to say?" Schiller took a sip of hot coffee, and after the warmth entered his stomach, he let out a satisfied sigh. Then he said, "No rush. Let's analyze the current situation first. Gotham was at risk of flooding due to several days of continuous heavy rain. We implemented a series of emergency measures, which, although causing huge losses, saved the lives and property of countless citizens. Now, our investigation has concluded that this flood was a man-made conspiracy. A group of terrorists used a weather-related disaster weapon against Gotham, and now—" Schiller trailed off, then continued, "The culprit is frozen inside a huge block of ice beneath Gotham. Detective Gordon, what do you think is the most important element in this kidnapping case?" Go logged in and asked, "What is it? To persuade the kidnappers? To protect the hostages? That's how the police see it, but right now we're the kidnappers." Schiller tapped the table and emphasized, "It's a ransom demand. Obviously, now that we have the hostage, we can start talking about money, can't we?" Gordon's mouth dropped open. He glanced at Schiller, Batman, and Victor and said, "So this is your ultimate goal? To use the flood caused by the Court of Owls themselves to freeze them all underground, and then demand a ransom?" Schiller gestured to Victor, who, holding the stack of documents, said, "The location of the cryogenic generator is meticulously designed to ensure that all rooms and passageways connected to the surface within Gotham's underground area are completely filled with solid ice, without any omissions. In other words, if people trapped here want to leave Gotham's underground, they only have two options. Or dig down into the rock layers, to a place where the cryogenic emitters can't reach, and then dig out Gotham City. Either we dig upwards, break through the hard ice layer, and then we can leave underground. But actually, they shouldn't have that ability, right?" Gordon understood Victor's implication. "I'm not being arrogant," Victor said, putting down the documents, "but digging upwards is absolutely impossible. They can't possibly break the ice layer I created. And digging downwards," Schiller continued, "given the size of Gotham City, it would take at least a year to dig it out. Ultimately, these people make a living through intrigue. When it comes to physical strength, they're probably no match for street thugs who fight all the time. The gang of claws they raise are killers, not excavators. Even if there were 10 times that number, it would be impossible to dig them out by manpower alone. So, we kidnapped the Court of Owls?" Gordon gave a strange look and said, "I thought they were some kind of formidable organization. Well, look what happened. We're completely trapped." "So?" Gordon paused, seemingly still a little unaccustomed to his role, and said, "We're now the kidnappers demanding ransom from them?" Schiller shook his head and said, "It's just a metaphor, detective. You haven't grasped the essence. We're not kidnappers. We were just acting in self-defense. This group of terrorists called the Court of Owls, yes, they are terrorists. They used a large-scale weather disaster weapon, threatening the safety of all citizens and causing such great losses. Shouldn't we legally and reasonably seek compensation from them?" Gordon glanced at Batman, who remained silent and showed no surprise at the statement. Clearly, this was part of their plan, and Batman was one of the insiders. "By the way, detective, what are the police station's losses?" The police station didn't suffer any losses. This wasn't a gang shootout. We just helped evacuate the citizens and adjusted the traffic routes for the construction crew." "Really? But these terrorists are so vicious. Didn't they send assassins to attack you?" Gordon looked at Schiller and asked tentatively, "Did they send them out?" "Oh yes, they did. 2 teams of assassins." No, at least a battalion." Gordon covered his forehead and said, "This is outrageous. They've been operating in Gotham for hundreds of years. If they didn't even have this kind of manpower, how could they be considered Gotham's largest and oldest terrorist organization?" "Okay, but—" Schiller raised his voice, his tone rising and falling. "The brave warriors of the Gotham Police Department fought them all night, forging Gotham's immortal glory with their blood. 3,000 police officers risked their lives, and after a night of bloody fighting, more than half were killed, and the remaining half were all seriously wounded. Their greatness deserves to be remembered. But The entire Gotham Police Department doesn't even have 300 people. Gordon touched his chest, seemingly feeling a pang of conscience. It's okay, Sheriff Gordon. We are the victims. We'll tell you how much we have. Schiller suddenly changed the subject, asking, what about the upscale apartments on Gamo Street? Of course it's great. It's top-notch on the outskirts of the wealthy Southern District. Back then, Gordon suddenly seemed to choke, his face flushing slightly. He looked at Schiller and said, I'm not that kind of person. You can't bribe me like this. I'm a police officer with a conscience. Let conscience be reserved for those who need it. Just then, Mayor Roy burst in, a walkie-talkie in hand, his boots covered in mud, clearly having just walked through the street. He exclaimed, Guys, good news. Very minor casualties. Roy said incredulously, Gotham's citizens have incredible emergency evacuation capabilities. We issued a danger warning 3 hours in advance, and within 3 hours, almost all the citizens had evacuated to safe high-rise buildings. Even Metropolis can't match this kind of mobilization ability, can it? Roy remarked with considerable emotion. In such a massive disaster, fewer than 20 people died. Most of them were drunkards who had lost their senses or addicts who were high on drugs. Although several thousand people were injured, most of them did not suffer serious injuries and did not even need to be hospitalized. First aid kits were sufficient. You don't even know how many gang shootouts happen in Gotham every day, Gordon whispered. Those who are slow to run are already dead. Schiller tapped the table, quite displeased, and said, Mayor Roy, you've come at a very inopportune time. We're discussing the losses to Gotham City. What's wrong? Isn't it a good thing if the loss is small? Roy asked, his eyes wide. Mayor Roy? Schiller smiled at Roy, then asked, Are you aware of the kidnapping case? Gordon covered his face with his hands. 10 minutes later, Roy picked up a tissue and blew his nose hard. The table in front of him was piled high with tissues used for wiping snot and tears. He said with great sorrow, This horrific disaster has filled me with grief. Hundreds and thousands of lives have been lost, and the great achievements of human civilization have been destroyed. These inhuman terrorists, they carried out a massacre in Gotham City, killing over 10,000 of our civilians. All of Gotham's hospitals are overflowing, and countless others are going without treatment due to lack of medical care. God, save us. Roy blew his nose hard again, crying as he said, This is the largest terrorist attack in the history of the Federation. The souls of hundreds of thousands of victims will forever nail the name of this terrorist organization to the pillar of shame. Court of Owls. Gordon stared at Roy, seemingly surprised by his superb acting skills. Do you think it's better for me to grieve gradually, or to have a strong outburst from the start? Roy grabbed another tissue, wiped his tears, and said, I think the latter would be more impactful. That's settled then. You'll open the press conference tomorrow. The reporters have already been contacted. The largest newspapers and media outlets on the entire East Coast will be there. You'll have about 30 minutes to express your feelings. Then Schiller slammed his hand on the table, drawing everyone's attention, and said, All right, next, let's contact the victim, the culprit. After saying that, he looked at Batman and said, They should have a unique signal transmitter to communicate with ground surveillance. If you could intercept that signal. Before Schiller could finish speaking, Batman said, In fact, I've already intercepted it and locked their location. I can send communications to them. Batman looked at Schiller and said, Do you have anything to say to them? Schiller smiled, sending a chill down the spines of the remaining men. In the dark underground conference room of Gotham, people wearing white bird-shaped masks were still gathered around the huge long table, but they had long lost their former composure. Just then, a radio placed on the nearby cabinet, used for communication, suddenly emitted a few crackling sounds. Everyone turned their heads, and when their eyes fell on the radio, a slightly hoarse voice came from it. I want to play a game with you guys. Chapter 168, The Long Easter, Part 5. First of all, I want to tell you that, just as you guessed, your base is now completely sealed off like a can, and the oxygen in the cans is limited. How many of you are there now? I'd guess at least 20, right? At this rate, the oxygen in the can will only keep you alive for a maximum of 3 hours. You think you've hidden this stronghold well, but we discovered it a long time ago. Just as you guessed, this is a premeditated trap, and now, I'm going to play a game with you. An oxygen pipe leads to this tank, but the oxygen supply port is hidden in the wall. You have to dig through the wall yourselves to find the pipe. Otherwise, the oxygen will run out in 3 hours. Owls need to breathe too, right? The woman wearing the bird-shaped mask began to tremble slightly, but the voice on the radio had not stopped. Everyone heard her say, "Don't fantasize that your companions or the assassins you trained will come to save you. Judging from the thickness and hardness of the ice surrounding you, no one, not even a machine, can dig to you within 3 hours." The sound from the tape recorder began to rise and fall, echoing throughout the conference room, darker and more terrifying than the nursery rhymes circulated by the Owl Court. In the past, you stood atop the high rises of Gotham City, looking down upon the suffering people, watching them dig for food in the earth to fill their stomachs. Later, you hid underground and looked up at countless pairs of mortal feet, scarred and battered, rushing about for survival. And now, you will experience what it's like to earn a living with your own hands. They heard the voice from the tape recorder soften, even become gentle, like a dream. My little birds, dig your fingers off in order to get a sliver of the most mundane and lowly air. Or, with your deaths, offer sacrifices for the resurrection of Gotham. After the sound faded, someone in the conference room finally couldn't hold back any longer. A masked man, trembling all over, threw the tape recorder out, and it crashed to the ground. The others watched his frantic act in silence. "Are we really going to dig?" The woman's voice trembled slightly as she said, "There are no tools here. How are we going to dig through these walls? We're trapped. If we don't dig, we'll suffocate." "But what if he's lying to us?" An old voice said. "But if we wait here, we're sure to die. This is an elaborate trap. They won't let us go. Do you expect me to dig through those bricks with my fingers?" Another man shouted, then stood up, waving his somewhat obese arms and said, "I'm one of the 13 jurors, and the most senior one. My family too. You all go dig. I order you." Others stood up and refuted his words, with one saying, "My family is the richest right now. You should be the ones digging for it." Some people also said, "It should be the strong ones who go to dig. Why should I go? This is all your fault. You should have gone. You too." In the midst of the argument, a few seconds of silence suddenly fell. Clearly, some of them had come up with a way to prolong their lives that was easier than digging into the wall. In the Gotham Police Department office, everyone was silent. Gordon shivered and looked at Schiller, saying, "I think the problems with the Court of Owls might not be so serious." "What's serious is, you didn't actually plan this all along, did you?" Victor also turned to look at Schiller. Schiller rolled his eyes and said, "They're kidding. Who knows where their hidden strongholds are tucked away? Why would I go to all that trouble to lay an oxygen pipeline for them? All right, let's not talk about that anymore. The rest is just bargaining." "Detective Gordon, I remember you said before that there are a few gang leaders who are particularly difficult to deal with and like to negotiate with the police." "Don't even mention it," Gordon said, rubbing his temples. "Just thinking about them gives me a headache." "All right, let them be. Let them take turns arguing with the Owl Court and tell them that they will get 5% of the final settlement." "Hiss," Gordon gasped. "The Court of Owls will be in deep trouble." Then Gordon clicked his tongue and said, "I always felt you had this planned all along. Would you like to hear me tell a fairy tale?" Schiller smiled and winked. They were a flock of little birds with golden feathers. The poor birds had carelessly fallen into the hands of a hunter. They begged for the hunter's forgiveness and were willing to pluck their precious feathers in exchange for the hunter's mercy. Schiller suddenly changed the subject, asking, "What are you planning to eat for Easter?" He answered his own question, "Anyway, I'm planning to eat roast chicken." The next morning, news of the massive terrorist attack on Gotham City made headlines in major newspapers. Mayor Roy broke down in tears at a press conference, condemning the casualties caused by terrorists and blaming the federal government for failing to fulfill its security obligations, calling Gotham a forsaken city. Collapsed buildings, ruins of streets, flooded shops, and cars frozen in ice. As images of the aftermath surfaced, the Court of Owls became synonymous with cruel terrorists despised by all. Various confusing news reports emerged one after another, and the casualty figures began to become more and more exaggerated, from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands at the beginning. In the end, it was said that more than half of Gotham's citizens were either dead or injured. Strangely, however, fundraising activities started even faster than disaster relief efforts. Major newspapers published fundraising channels, and Gotham hosted dozens of charity dinners in the week leading up to Easter. On a chilly weekend morning, Reports on the desk in the city government office swayed in the breeze outside the window. The thin sheets of paper were turned page after page. The numbers kept increasing, and finally, a stamp was stamped on it with a click. Roy raised his hand, handed the report to his subordinate, and said, "Happy Easter." As he finished speaking, the branches outside the window began to grow, and tender green buds stretched out from the nodes of the branches, marking the start of the largest reconstruction in Gotham's history. Previously, Gotham's redevelopment was basically a patchwork approach, building warehouses where there was space and bus stations where there was space. This gave the urban planning professors at Gotham University a major headache. This piecemeal approach to reconstruction was actually the least effective method, but at the time there was no other way. But this time it's different. Due to a wave of flooding followed by a wave of freezing, the volume expansion caused by the water turning into ice has cracked most of the ground surface. Without repairs, it will be completely impassable. Even if you don't want your land to be redeveloped, there's nothing you can do. The roads are so badly damaged that you can't even walk on them. If you don't participate in the redevelopment, you'll just have to stay at home and starve to death. Since things have already come to this point, and things are already ruined, we still have to repair them if we want to continue living here. Overnight, Gotham's unemployment rate nearly dropped to zero because manpower was needed everywhere. Rebuilding sewers, repairing roads and collapsed houses, and constructing new logistics facilities according to the new plan. This sounds very unreasonable because there is no output in the short term, but the organizers need to pay a lot of labor costs, which requires an astronomical amount of upfront investment. But thanks to the already plucked bald Court of Owls, those unfortunate souls imprisoned in this powerful alliance have, in order to survive, tearfully plucked all their feathers, providing ample funding for Gotham's reconstruction plan. Even if they cannot profit in the short term, they can still persevere. With funding and personnel in place, the reconstruction plan will proceed very smoothly, and the benefits brought by the underground ice layer are not limited to one aspect. Gotham is an East Coast city with a humid monsoon climate and 4 distinct seasons, meaning cold winters and hot summers. In the past, temperatures would have already risen significantly by April, marking the beginning of the hot summer. However, the massive underground ice sheet altered the local climate, causing Gotham's average temperature to drop by more than 10 degrees Celsius, returning it to early winter temperatures. The residents of Gotham City are not used to this climate, and there has been a high incidence of colds these days. However, some people are looking for a place to escape the heat, but can't find a suitable location. The East Coast isn't all like Gotham with its distinct 4 seasons. Some places are very hot, and by April it's already sweltering. If these people want to escape the heat, they have to go further north, and now, Gotham has become the closest city with low temperatures to them. Of course, they wouldn't dare to travel to Gotham, but Gotham's climate change has also affected surrounding areas, such as Broadhaven, where tourism has suddenly boomed. Broadhaven was almost stunned by the windfall. This is actually just a small city. Because it's so close to Gotham, there aren't many outsiders, so it's relatively undeveloped and has a lot of natural rural scenery. Unlike Gotham, it's not cloudy or rainy every day. Since Gotham's climate changed, Broodhaven has enjoyed sunny days and cool breezes in the mornings and evenings, making it a comfortable place to visit and attracting many tourists from surrounding cities. Because Broodhaven is so close to Gotham, much of the news from Gotham reaches here immediately. But what these tourists saw was not a terrifying city full of murders or daily bloodshed. All the news coming out of Gotham could be summed up in 2 words: manpower shortage. As mentioned before, although Gotham has a large local population, they spend too much time idling and their work efficiency is too low. Even with full employment, it would still not be enough to rebuild such a large city. Although Gotham is a megacity, it doesn't have many migrant workers. In this era of comprehensive infrastructure upgrades, labor shortages have become the biggest obstacle to efficiency. Major gangs are frantically searching for people, even offering high prices to hire outsiders. As the saying goes, a large forest has all kinds of birds, and with a large population, there are always a few who are not afraid of death. Indeed, there are a few people who dare to risk their lives to come to Gotham to work. Actually, they weren't entirely driven by curiosity. It was because the gangs here were offering incredibly high prices. After all, it was all owl feathers, so they didn't feel bad using them. The gangs kept raising their wages, and it was paid daily, making it hard not to be tempted. When the outsiders arrived in Gotham, they found that the city was not quite what they had imagined. They had thought it would be a city of constant gunfights and free shopping, but after arriving, they discovered that Gotham was orderly. Compared to other regions, Gotham is indeed very strange. The maintainers of order here are gangsters. They are tough, violent, full of ideas and crazy, but a violent order is still an order. When the entire city enters a frenzied atmosphere of working together to make the pie bigger, many of the drawbacks of violent order are masked, while the remaining advantages are astonishing, such as efficiency and stability. Using the word stable to describe such a city sounds absurd, but it is true. Outsiders have discovered that the order established by the gangs is actually quite stable, at least when there is ample funding and everyone has work to do. The world is not short of desperate people willing to risk their lives for money. News of money to be made in Gotham spread quickly, and many such people began to flock to Gotham to try their luck. The influx of more and more outsiders began to draw attention to and discuss the situation inside Gotham, and the veil of mystery surrounding this sinful city was gradually lifted, with the city starting to appear in major media outlets and newspapers. Many people see it as a barbaric wasteland, some as a crime-ridden metropolis, but many more see it as a chaotic yet affluent metropolis based on these reports. Here, gang leaders drive luxury cars, smoke cigars, and throw stacks of banknotes from the rooftops. Rock singers perform heavy metal amidst the rain of money, with chaotic yet vibrant graffiti in the background. Neon lights illuminate the endless stream of cars on the road, and crowds shout wildly on the roadside. Just like Schiller, people began to realize that this was not only a city of crime, but also a city of genius. A city of sin, but also a city of art. No other city in the world possesses the absurd and bizarre beauty of Gotham. It is fertile ground for performance art and a paradise for misunderstood madmen. Many people even found resonance in this atmosphere. They began to try to deconstruct the causes and current state of such a unique city, and were then infected by the overflowing madness here, becoming spiritual residents of this sinful city. Artists worship madness, intellectuals shout for freedom, fools live absurd lives, and the clever amass fortunes. Gotham's chaos has bred countless distinct souls, and no place has ever seen people so different. As this quality gradually became recognized, Gotham's image transformed from a corrupt and evil city into a source of evil imbued with a touch of divinity and mystery. It's hard to say if this is a good change, but at least there has been a change. This change in external image also brought about other changes. For example, the phone at Gotham University's admissions office started ringing non-stop, and some young people who sought rebellion and novelty began to include Gotham University on their list of schools to apply to. However, Gotham University professors had little time to answer questions. The frozen Gotham also affected the university's teaching facilities, mainly causing road surface cracking, which was a major headache. Because large areas of the school square and playground have cracked, students cannot move around. The teaching building has become a dangerous building overnight due to foundation damage, and no one dares to go there. Teaching activities have been temporarily suspended, and there is no manpower available elsewhere to help. Teachers and students have to do it themselves. Almost all the planned pre-Easter activities were canceled. A corner of the restaurant building collapsed, so there was no way to organize any banquets. Everyone seemed to have forgotten about Easter, and everyone was focused on rebuilding the campus. Schiller led several students quickly down the corridor to the door of the large classroom. As soon as he opened it, the students saw him and shouted, "Professor, over here. We can't hold him down much longer." Schiller walked over and saw several students holding down a boy who was struggling wildly. He was waving his arms and shouting, foaming at the mouth and convulsing, just like a mental illness attack. Schiller said, "Subdue him first, then put him in the car and take him to the hospital." After Schiller arrived at Arkham Asylum in the car, before he could even begin to treat a patient, he received another phone call. Victor said on the other end, "Another person in dormitory building number 2 has had an episode. It seems to be a sophomore girl. What's going on? It could be a side effect of getting caught in the rain. I need to conduct a thorough examination. If there are any more cases, you should send them directly to the hospital." After Schiller hung up the phone, he went to the boys' ward. Through the observation window, he saw the boy cowering to one side of the bed, his face filled with fear, repeatedly shouting meaningless syllables. Schiller shook his head and whispered, "Something's not right." He called Victor and asked, "Have these students been exposed to anything lately? Didn't you say you were getting rained on?" These symptoms are not quite the same as those from being caught in the rain. Although both involve convulsions and agitation, there are some differences in the details. "What have they been in contact with?" Victor's tone was full of doubt. He said, "Let me ask around for you. These 2 students aren't in the same class." "Oh, wait, what did you say? Damn it." Another one has had an attack. Where is he? Take me there quickly. Then, as Victor ran, he said into the phone, another student has fallen ill. I'll let you know once I find the commonalities. Chapter 169, The Long Easter, Part 6. The patient in room 2 still needs to be observed. Also, the medication dosages for the 2 patients on the 4th floor yesterday have been changed. Go get the prescriptions from Nurse Jenny. And keep a close eye on room 13. He dislocated his arm joint while struggling yesterday. Wearing a white coat, Schiller strode down the corridor, giving instructions to the nurses behind him as he went. When he entered the office, Brand was leaning against the sofa, dozing with his eyes half closed. Hearing the noise, he jolted awake, sneezed, and said in a hoarse voice, "You're here? How is the patient?" Schiller shook his head, put down the medical record in his hand, and said, "It's not very optimistic. 5 more people were admitted yesterday, one of whom, a boy, has very serious symptoms. I have to go over there later. You go ahead. I'll take care of things here." As he spoke, Brand stood up and walked to the coffee machine, intending to pour himself a cup of coffee. Schiller said, "Give me an espresso too. 2 cups. I'm a little sleepy." "You're only feeling sleepy now? Thank goodness. You've been working for over 50 hours straight, haven't you?" Schiller yawned and said, "It's all right. I'll go take a nap after I've dealt with that boy's situation." After saying that, he took the coffee from Brand and left. Arriving at a ward on the 5th floor, pushing open the door, a boy on the bed began to struggle wildly like a wild beast suddenly awakened. If his arms hadn't been tied to the railing, he might have already jumped up and pounced on Schiller. Schiller ignored his reaction and went to his bedside, frowning as he observed his response. Schiller knew he couldn't diagnose it as a normal psychiatric case, because all the patients admitted that day and night had the same symptoms, which was clearly not a natural onset. If the illness is not caused by natural causes, then the cause may be very bizarre, and may even involve some mystical elements. Such cases are almost impossible to analyze using modern medical methods, but so far, Schiller has not found a good treatment method. As Schiller was pondering, a brainwave transmitted from the gray mist within his body said, "I can." "What? You can do what? You want to check, right?" "I can do that." Schiller asked, puzzled. "How do you plan to examine me?" "You touch him with one hand." Schiller followed the instructions of the gray mist and reached out a hand to touch the boy's shoulder. The boy twisted his head desperately, his face contorted as he tried to bite Schiller's hand. But as the barely perceptible gray mist drifted into his body, the boy gradually calmed down. A series of brainwaves fed back into Schiller's brain, allowing him to understand certain functions of the human body from a different, more intuitive perspective. He said to the gray fog in his mind, "When did you learn this? Take your hand away." Schiller hesitated for a moment, then removed his hand. He found that he suddenly had another person's perspective, that of the boy who was looking at the ceiling. Schiller said with some surprise, "You've split apart?" A series of negative emotions emanated from the symbiote. Immediately afterwards, a wisp of gray mist drifted out of the boy's body and returned to Schiller. The second perspective disappeared, as if it had never existed. The symbiote also remained unchanged, without any additional consciousness emerging. "I am different from them," the symbiote's voice came. "I am mist, and mist was never a whole." Then, through the brainwaves transmitted by the symbiote, Schiller understood that the gray fog was very different from other symbiotes because of its different form of existence. Since its form was fog, it could not split, or rather, it was splitting at all times. Other symbiotes are also composed of symbiote factors, but venom symbiote factors are bonded together, and once separated, they become 2 independent individuals. However, the symbiotic factors of the gray fog are not connected. They are dispersed. Even if they are cut apart, at most the distance between them will increase, and they will still be a whole. "Can't you reproduce like other symbiotes?" "Yes, as long as I voluntarily give up that part of the factor, I will become another symbiote." Schiller nodded, then said, "So, you can attach yourself to someone else, and the part of you that's attached to someone else will still obey your commands, while I can indirectly control others through you?" The gray fog transmitted a positive brainwave saying, "But the factor control is limited, so it cannot make precise movements. It can only understand his state, and the farther away it is, the weaker the information transmitted will be." "Why didn't you say so before?" Schiller asked. "It didn't work before, but recently there's food everywhere, and I'm so full, so it works now." "Food everywhere?" Schiller asked doubtfully. Could it be the rainwater? Does the rainwater also have an effect on you? Like wine? The symbiotic question provides the answer. Like fear venom. It tastes good and it's very filling. Schiller stroked his chin. He thought, if rainwater is also useful for symbionts, then it means that there are certain substances in rainwater that can stimulate symbionts. He thought to himself, that poor Venom is so unlucky. If he came back to Gotham with me, there would be plenty of food in the whole city. Why would he be thinking about those few chocolate balls? Afterwards, Schiller had the gray mist attached to the boy's body and conducted a thorough examination. He then discovered an unknown substance in the boy's blood, which was the culprit behind his madness and mania. Schiller did not act rashly because he did not know the cause of this substance. Out of a sense of responsibility to the patient, he felt it would be safer to find out the culprit first before starting treatment. Therefore, he withdrew the gray fog and planned to observe it for a while longer. Just as Schiller was trying to calm the patient with the gray fog, Victor called again, saying, "Come quick, something's happened." Hearing Victor's serious tone, Schiller went back to his office to change his clothes before heading to Gotham University. As soon as he entered the school gate, he saw 2 police cars parked on the main road. Further ahead, a large crowd had formed a circle, and the police were shouting through police tape, "Make way! Make way!" Schiller walked over, and just as the young officer was about to stop him, an older officer pulled his colleague aside and said, "Professor Rodriguez, right? Chief Gordon will be here soon. Please go in first." Schiller nodded to him, then strode into the cordon. He saw Victor standing next to a police car, and a policeman was questioning him. Schiller went over and asked, "What exactly happened?" As he spoke, he glanced behind the police car, where it appeared to be the scene of a fall, with a figure lying on the ground and blood splattered everywhere. "Selden is dead," Victor said, looking back at the scene of the fall. "He fell from the balcony of his office, from the 8th floor, and died instantly. Tell me exactly what happened." Victor shook his head and said, "I don't know either. You should know that we've been short-staffed lately, and many students have fallen ill. I'm busy both treating the patients and investigating what they have in common." Victor glanced at the police officer who was writing furiously and continued, "I was so busy that my head was spinning, when Principal Selden suddenly called me and asked me to come to his office, so I had to put down my work and rush over to the administration building. I went into the administration building as usual. Just as I got to the 4th floor, I saw a dark figure fall through the window in the hallway. Then I heard a loud bang, and when I looked down through the window, I saw Selden's body. To be honest," Schiller patted Victor on the shoulder and said, "your description has increased your suspicion by 30% out of nowhere. Don't say that when Gordon comes later. But I'm stating the truth. You can embellish the process a little. For example, you and Selden had a very pleasant conversation on the phone, and he strongly urged you to come to his office for a small gathering. You couldn't refuse no matter what you did, so you had no choice but to go to the administration building. Because of the cracks in the building, there was a power outage and the elevator was out of service, so you had to climb the stairs. As a researcher who was physically weak, you were already exhausted when you reached the 3rd floor. You climbed to the 4th floor, panting, and leaned against the window to rest. That's when you saw an unidentified dark figure fall. You were terrified. Your legs were trembling. So without thinking, you ran out of the building and called the police. Don't forget," Schiller reminded Victor, "you're an outsider, not a Gotham local. Only a Gotham local would remain so calm about a murder. I only realized after I got here that this godforsaken place is actually quite suitable for me." Victor shrugged. "I don't know why, but I don't feel anything for corpses and blood. I'm a bit too calm." Soon, another police car stopped, and Gordon hurriedly rushed out of the car. The first thing he saw was Schiller. Gordon took a deep breath and walked quickly forward. He first craned his neck to look at the body, then walked to Schiller's side and looked him over suspiciously. "I didn't do this. There are witnesses right here." Schiller shoved Victor forward, and Victor explained to Gordon, "It's like this." Victor repeated what Schiller had told him, which made Gordon frown. He said, "You've made this up a bit too far-fetched. How could that be?" "Oh wait, you're an outsider, right? That makes sense. When Gotham locals see someone fall from a building, all they do is curse bullshit, and then keep complaining to me about how the blood and brains have dirted the ground and demanding that we clean it up immediately. Regardless, let's go check out the scene first." The group walked around the police car and came inside the police cordon. where Selden's body lay across the middle of the road. Schiller glanced at him and said, "He wasn't very lucky. He landed right on a sharp corner of a crack in the road. Otherwise, he might have had a chance of surviving." Gordon waved his hand, and a group of police officers began investigating the crime scene, then moved the body into the car and took it back for an autopsy. Gordon stood at the spot where Selden had fallen, looking up at the lights still on the 8th floor of the administration building. He turned to Schiller and Victor and said, "I'm sorry, gentlemen, but according to standard procedure, you cannot participate in what follows, and eyewitness Mr. Victor Frith needs to come with us. As for you, Professor Rodriguez, you'll probably have to wait for a summons." To Gordon's surprise, neither of them showed any objection. Victor cooperated fully and got into the police car with the officers, while Schiller did not insist on participating in the case and instead turned and left. Before leaving, Schiller told Gordon, "While I'm happy to cooperate with your investigation, there are too many patients at Arkham Asylum lately, and I have to prioritize their safety. I've heard before that many students at Gotham University have fallen ill at the same time." "What's going on?" Gordon asked Schiller. "I have a few clues, but I haven't figured it out yet. Don't look at me like that. I don't need to create trouble for myself. After they go crazy, won't I be the one to treat them? I haven't slept for 50 hours straight. Professor Rodriguez, I must remind you, no matter what, I will find out the truth about the murder." Gordon paused here and then continued, "Hopefully, the final result of my investigation won't be you again." Chapter 170, The Long Easter, Part 7. In the Gotham Police Department's interrogation room, Schiller blew on a cup of hot coffee, and the rising steam drifted away, staining the lenses of his glasses. The officer sitting opposite him stood up and gave Gordon his seat. Gordon tapped the table and said exasperatedly, "Can't you act like a suspect? This is a police interrogation room. Not handcuffing you is no excuse for you to drink coffee." The police officers outside were complaining that you wouldn't drink an Americano and insisted on an espresso, so they had to run up to the 4th floor to use the new coffee machine. "Could you please stop acting like you know the interrogation room like the back of your hand? Like a repeat offender? I'm from out of town. That's why I'm sitting here drinking coffee. If I were a local." Schiller looked up and glanced around. Gordon followed his gaze, and the two looked at the dense bullet holes on the wall. Gordon was speechless for a moment. He knew what Schiller meant by the second half of his sentence. If they were locals from Gotham, a full-blown fight would have already broken out by now. "Whatever you've found out, I can only tell you that you've come to the wrong person. I'm just a university professor who has never even fired a gun." Gordon sighed again. He sat down opposite Schiller and said, "According to our investigation, you are the only one in the school who has a clear conflict with the new principal, Selden. You are our key target for investigation." "What conflict do I have with him?" Schiller asked Gordon. "I have completed all the teaching tasks he assigned perfectly, and I have not missed a single assignment, even those that were outside my job scope. I've taken on the roles of freshman guide, librarian, and archivist, and I haven't even asked for a raise. But according to testimonies from other faculty and staff, the new headmaster, Selden, was quite dissatisfied with you." "He was dissatisfied with me, so why was he the one who died?" "That's a question for you. You can't assume my motives by guessing what I'm thinking. In my opinion, he's not a good principal, but he's not too bad either. Maybe he has personal issues with me, but we haven't had any disagreements or real conflicts at work, and we haven't infringed on each other's interests. There's no deep-seated hatred that would make it worth killing someone." Gordon looked at him silently. He knew that Schiller was right. According to their investigation, although Selden seemed to have a bad attitude towards Schiller and was always looking for trouble, they did not have much conflict at work. There was no instance of Schiller disobeying work arrangements, and the two rarely communicated or had any direct arguments. In fact, Gordon didn't have high hopes for Schiller's investigation, because based on his understanding of the professor, if he were to take action, he wouldn't use such a direct method, and if he did, he wouldn't let anyone catch any evidence. In comparison, Victor is more suspicious because he was the first to discover the crime scene, and he had a good relationship with Schiller but not with Selden. Furthermore, Victor had previously complained to his colleagues that Selden's Easter schedule was too packed. While this wasn't enough to warrant murder, it did show that he didn't particularly like the new headmaster. According to Gordon's investigation, Selden had no bad habits. If anything, he was too much like a politician, always moving among the powerful and wealthy, participating in various banquets and events of Gotham's upper class, and expressing his views on various social events in his capacity as the principal. Of course, perhaps out of fear of the gangsters, he was not a righteous and rational person, and his attitude was quite wavering. Such a person is not likely to make a deadly enemy of others. Schiller, sitting across from Gordon, said, "Actually, I do have a clue to tell you." "What is it?" Schiller put down his coffee cup, placed his hands on the table, and said, "This new principal is keen on associating with the upper echelons of the mafia, just as he has with powerful figures in other cities. But gangsters and ordinary businessmen are different. The lifeline and secrets of certain illegal industries cannot be known to anyone. I suspect, of course, it's just suspicion." "You mean Selden might have been silenced?" Gordon pondered for a moment, then said, "That's certainly possible. The level of the gang members he associates with does allow them access to secrets unknown to others. If Selden is involved in something, of course, I want to emphasize that this is just a guess, and it is my personal guess. I am not implying anything, and I have not heard any rumors." Gordon stared at him, rolled his eyelids up to look at Schiller from above, and asked, "The law of silence?" Schiller shook his head and made the sign of the cross on his chest. Just as Gordon continued his conversation with Schiller, a police officer knocked on the door, walked in, saluted Gordon, and said, "Boss, we've made a new discovery." Then the young officer glanced at Schiller, seemingly asking Gordon if he wanted to go outside to talk, to which Gordon replied directly, "No need to go outside, we'll talk here." This is also a common tactic in interrogations, using new developments in the case to increase pressure on the person being interrogated. Gordon didn't actually intend to use this method against Schiller. He was just used to it. "We discovered that all the drawers and cabinets on the victim's desk had been ransacked. A locked drawer at the bottom of the desk had been pried off. So we searched the entire desk carefully and found a hidden compartment on the side of the middle drawer." As he spoke, the young officer took out a transparent plastic bag containing a cassette tape. Gordon gestured to the officer behind him to bring a tape recorder, then put on gloves, took out the tape, examined it, and said, "There doesn't seem to be any damage on the surface. It should be playable." Gordon put the tape into the tape recorder and pressed a button. The first sound that came out of the recorder was a buzzing electrical sound, followed by a burst of noise. Immediately afterwards, a familiar voice came from the tape. "The goods from Plantation 9 go through Old Wilkins Route, the route that goes through 3 streets in the East End. Their volume is so large that the delivery point is set up in the basement of a nightclub. If you need, I can put in a word with him." "You're worried about that?" "There's no need. As far as I know, that underground chemical plant in the West District is also owned by Falcone." Upon hearing this, Gordon's finger twitched, and he immediately turned off the recorder. He said to the others in the room, "For your own safety, you didn't hear anything, understand?" The young subordinates immediately covered their ears, nodded, and left. After they left, Gordon glared at Schiller, who said to Gordon, "Officer, I'm calling the police. Someone is eavesdropping on my privacy and recording me." "What kind of privacy is this?" "You. Then you can simply broadcast this recording over the police station's loudspeaker. If you want to destroy the Gotham Police Department, just say so." Gordon took a deep breath, sat down, and gestured for Schiller to sit as well, saying soothingly, all right, I'm not saying you killed Selden, but you should at least explain to me what happened." "I'll say it again, I didn't kill him." Schiller sat down, took another sip of coffee, and said, "You should know that there are cameras inside Gotham University, right? Our principal Selden observes the campus every day through cameras from his office. That also includes the phone calls I received in public areas, but I really didn't know he was recording them." Schiller shook his head and said, "I have to say, as an outsider, he's really bold." Gordon exhaled the breath he had been holding in, and then said, "It seems he really was silenced. This is the crime scene." Gordon picked up a stack of photos and said, "According to our investigation, Selden was pushed off the building. The balcony railing of his 8th floor office is very low. He must have been standing in front of the railing when someone pushed him and he fell down. According to the on-site investigation, he was likely facing away from the person when he was pushed down. This means that he probably knew the murderer and was not on guard against him. He was pushed down while speaking to the murderer with his back to him. This was an inside job, and the method was very different from the Gotham style. It didn't involve submachine guns or shotguns, or even a pistol. So Victor and I became suspects, right? Because we too knew Selden fairly well, and we were outsiders who weren't very good with guns and weren't strong enough. Now you're much more suspicious than Victor, after all. He heard some inside information from you. You have a reason to silence him. Just then, a loud noise came from the center of the police station lobby, accompanied by shouts and curses. Gordon immediately stood up, and an officer rushed in and said, "Sheriff Gordon, something's happened. Don't panic, what happened?" Gordon stood up and turned to ask him. The officer shouted, "Winnie at the front desk and Bird on duty have suddenly gone berserk. The others are trying to stop them." Gone mad. Gordon immediately realized something. He turned around and opened the iron door of the interrogation room, letting Schiller out. Then the group hurried to the front hall. When they arrived at the lobby, the madman had been subdued, but he was still struggling and growling. Gordon tried to approach, but another sheriff stopped him, saying, "Don't go over there. They're crazy. I almost got bitten just now. What exactly happened? How could this have happened so suddenly?" "Who knows? I was chatting with Winnie about our Easter plans when she suddenly started convulsing. Then she leaned back violently, started slamming her arms against the counter, and even threw a chair. Bird on the other side also went crazy," said an officer who was holding Winnie down. Gordon wanted to go to the counter to check, but Schiller sniffed, pulled Gordon back and said, "Don't go there. Evacuate the people first, get the patients to the hospital, and then look for the gas masks in your armory. There might be something wrong with them." "You mean?" Gordon paused, then shouted, "Everyone back off. Get out of this room. Get to an open area. Don't come any closer." After everyone else had left, Schiller went in alone. He walked too fast for Gordon to stop him. When Schiller walked to the counter, he found some fragments of eggshells there, and they were even colorful. Gordon stood outside the room waving incessantly at Schiller. After observing the surroundings, Schiller came out and said to Gordon, "There must be something wrong with the Easter eggs." "An Easter egg? I think I heard Winnie mention it, saying she received a really nice Easter egg today," another policewoman said. "Do you remember the mass outbreak of illness among Gotham University students?" Schiller squinted, took out his phone, and called his colleague Anna, saying, "Hello. Yes. I wanted to ask if those Easter eggs you bought earlier have been distributed to the students yet." "Really? Do you remember who you sent them to? Could you give me a list?" "Okay. Thank you." Then he called Victor and asked, "Did you give those Easter eggs you made to the students? You already gave them to them? Do you remember who you gave them to? Can you give me a list?" Schiller explained to Gordon, "On the eve of Easter, Principal Selden suddenly distributed a lot of materials for making Easter eggs, asking the professors to make their own Easter eggs to give to the students. My colleague Anna and I found it too much trouble to make them ourselves, so we bought ready-made ones from outside. Now both types of Easter eggs have been distributed to students. I asked them for the list of students who received the Easter eggs, and by comparing them, we can figure out which Easter egg is problematic.